You're listening to the Forum Podcast, a production of Calvin Theological Seminary.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here, Alida, on the Forum Podcast.
Thanks, Aaron, for inviting me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Of course, yeah. So for our listeners, Alida is the co-founder of Community Counselling London, which is a counseling center in London, Ontario, where she supervises the center, but then also is a therapist as well and does some practice. So we're going to talk about change today. And the concept of leading change and actually leading change from the inside out. So maybe we should tell our listeners about how we met. So
Sure.
where did our paths cross? Let's tell the story there.
All right. Yeah. So it all started with an email that came through my email inbox from Calvin Theological Seminary, letting me know about this opportunity for an adaptive leadership cohort, a small group of people, a small group of leaders gathered to get together in person first for a retreat, and then meeting monthly for the next 6 months after that. So that retreat happened in April of 2024. So that's when I first met you, Aaron.
Yeah. And so we've crossed paths on a bit of your own change journey and the journey of trying to walk your own organization through some change. And so
Right.
I'm just excited to dig in and talk about that. So we're going to be talking about personal change today. But before we jump in to all that, why don't we just hear a little bit about what you do? So tell me about your role at the counseling center and
Yeah.
what your daily work is like.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of Community Counselling London. We started this counseling center, about 5 years ago. Um, and it was a kind of a vision of myself and Patricia Berenson, who is the other co-founder, and Patricia is a colleague of mine who has her own for-profit counseling practice. She herself is a therapist and counselor. And when I was going through a job change, I met with her for coffee, and she asked me if money were no, barrier, what would
Mm-hmm.
you like to do? And I started to cast this vision for developing a center that would be make counseling affordable for people. So it really the social justice issue of
Mm-hmm.
how expensive therapy is, and it really then the only people who can access it are those who have good jobs with insurance plans who can cover therapy, or people who have wealth. And what about so in my work as a spiritual care provider in hospitals, you've come across the wide cross section of all
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic levels and people, and recognizing that the people that I was seeing who really had a need or could have benefited from therapy didn't have the means to pay for it. And so starting a center that provided affordable counseling services for everyone
Mm-hmm.
was something that we really wanted to do. And as I was telling Patricia about this, she was starting to get really excited. I could tell, right? And I was like, and then she said, "That's my vision." She had had this vision for the last, 10 years as well. Even as she was working in her for-profit business, she had wanted to start something that also could be accessible for everyone. And so
Yeah.
out of that is where we kind of came up with a model where we could make that happen. And
Right.
the interesting thing is that our model is that I'm also a certified supervisor educator, so that I can supervise therapist interns. So that's kind of how we created our center. So not only are we supporting clients in change, and through therapy, but we're also growing, and supporting young professional therapists, to learn how to
Mm-hmm.
be therapists.
Excellent. So a couple different angles, right? A couple
Yeah.
different ways. So in your work, in the organization and in your practice and career, you alluded to it. You help people change, whether it's the way they see themselves or their emotional or spiritual kind of mindset or actual behaviors.
Mhm.
What have you observed or learned about humans and change? I'm going to leave it way broad so you can take it
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
direction you want. Like,
yeah, yeah.
what should we know about change? And
So change is really, really hard. Um, and people like clients who call and make appointments and want to come for therapy, people you call when something in your life it has reached the point where you know you have to do something about it.
hmm
And so people are motivated. That's the thing about therapy. People are motivated to want to change something in their lives, and then they come for therapy, and still, even when they know they need to make a change, change is really hard.
even when you really, really want to, you don't
Even
just
when
walk
you
in and say, "Yep, I'm going to do it now."
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what, yeah, like especially as I'm supervising therapist interns who come, who, for during our supervision times, they tell me about clients and they're like, I've been working with this person for like 15 sessions and they say they want to do this. This is their goal of therapy. And it seems that we can never get there, or we
hmm
never, like, even we talk about things in one session and then the next week they come back and they haven't, done anything of the suggestions or things that we talked about that was their idea for changing or so, right? Like it
Yeah,
just that's just the nature of it.
right. And that happens organizationally too, right? Organizations
Yes.
say we want to grow, or a lot of our
Yeah.
listeners are church leaders, and they say the church genuinely wants to do something, but they're just kind of stuck in some way. What's the
Yeah.
advice you give to those interns when they say I've had those 15 sessions and I'm doing what you trained me to do, and it
Right.
still doesn't seem to be helping? Uh,
Right.
what do you tell them?
Um, that it's not quick and
Uh-huh.
has patient, like, so I think that we have a perception that when we desire change, then we can put our minds to it and then it'll just happen and it'll happen quickly.
hmm
And so I yeah, the realization is that change happens slowly, and we need to be patient and persistent. So you have
hmm
to keep at it even when it feels like, and again, what I'm telling the therapist interns is you're trying different things, right? As therapists,
Yeah.
you're trying to support different things. You're looking at it from different angles. And so you're not just kind of doing the same thing, but also there's that grit and the persistence and perseverance and the stick-with-itness.
hmm
Also for clients, because clients are coming in and they're wanting the quick fix. And that's the other interesting thing, right? They're
mm
looking at to the therapist and going, I'm coming for therapy. You're like, tell me what to do. You're the one who has to fix me or change me. But
hmm
that's not how that works either. Like it
Right.
really, people have to look at themselves or people have to do the hard work themselves. And I think that's the other reality is people are wanting easy and quick, and it's really slow and hard.
hmm
So yeah, there's a lot.
So it seems like the expectation of the helper, which we're
Hmm.
talking about therapy, but
Yeah.
we could also be talking about spiritual care or any
Yes.
kind of solution focused conversation where you're trying to help somebody figure out how to do what they really want to do.
Yes.
Um, I guess that's where our change cohort comes into play. So my colleague Wendy Fisher, who's a trained spiritual director, she actually trains spiritual directors as well. We created a cohort designed to help leaders make progress in helping their organizations change, which you just talked about how difficult it is for an individual to change their one behavior. Imagine the complexity of a church that has all these different agendas on the council.
Right.
So we wanted to really support change, people leading change,
Hmm.
because oftentimes, almost similar to a person who sometimes your livelihood of a behavior change is required, like for health reasons or other reasons, and similarly, organizations in order to survive are needing to make some changes. So, uh, we took the approach. I'll just say, of course, we have done this cohort together, but for the listeners, um, maybe the novel approach or not so novel. It's backed by like 30 or 40 years of research of teaching change. As we said, well, let's see how hard it is to change ourselves, and maybe that's the playbook for change in our organizations. Um, and so the approach we took in the cohort is that, what's going on is that people are genuinely committed to those goals. They want to get healthier. They want to have less conflict with that person in their family, or they want to start managing their health better. There's genuinely a desire for change, but we introduced the idea of a competing commitment, right? That
Right.
although someone is committed to change, they're actually often subconsciously and unknowingly committed to staying the same at the same time. And so it's like someone driving a car with a gas pedal on full blast in counseling, but oh, they have the e-brake on actually, and
Yeah.
there's smoke and there's squealing tires, and maybe they're making a little bit of progress. And so sometimes we have these commitments to change, but our other commitments kind of have a hold of us, and those are based in preserving ourselves from the danger of change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so without going into a whole lecture about that, that's the idea that we went at and our teaching approach. So what we did is we realized that there's like a worry that's driving or fueling those competing commitments. So um, let's take a simple example. I'm committed to losing weight, but I'm also committed to enjoying my dessert. Like that's like the
Right.
two commitments. Now there's a lot more complexity with some of these other commitments, but that's the idea. So my main question for you is like, what was that like for you? Help us. What wisdom do you have from trying to navigate your own change in order to lead some change in your organization? Yeah, what was that process
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, it was really helpful to the concept of immunity to change, right?
Hmm.
Like, so looking into what is the worry, or what's a kind of a buried belief or so that's acting as the break, even though so as the leader of the Community Counseling London, um needing to find secure our financial
Yeah.
resources for financial sustainability, and kind of it's like my role as executive director and not really being good at fundraising and development. That's kind of what motivated me to sign up for the
Mm-hmm.
adaptive
Hmm.
leadership cohort in the first place. But then the process of learning about the desire for change, right? The external, like this is what has to happen, and yes, we want to
Hmm.
go there, and yes, as a leader, I need to support my organization in getting there. But then starting first with our own like personal awarenesses and looking at what that worry was, and being introduced to the concept of immunity to change
Hmm.
was really, really helpful,
Hmm.
to recognize what that break is. That brake is on full blast as well as the gas or whatever, to recognize that. And so um I just remember, and Aaron, you and Wendy's leadership of the different
Hmm.
components as we could reflect on this, and that exercise of really looking at the underlying assumption or the underlying belief, and realizing that my chief worry was, and it was a surprise, right? Like, I think that the
Hmm.
process in your leadership of getting us to reflect on that at different, it's like slowly at different, through a
Hmm.
four-part process
Hmm. Yeah, there's
exercise or
four
whatever.
columns. Yep.
Yeah. And the surprise was when I suddenly realized what that part, or what that underlying assumption for me
Hmm.
was, which was, I'm the only one who can save this center, or I'm the only one who can save this organization. And that was such a revelation to me that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize. I think I shared with the group, I didn't
Hmm.
realize I had a savior complex
Oh, yes, right.
for the center, right? As like, what? That is so, like, even though I had, a board that I was working with, and their staff, and we're doing this together, but the underlying thing that I was worried about was that I was carrying the whole burden, and I'm the only one who
Mm-hmm.
can save this center.
Hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. So on the one hand, you are committed to raising funds and expanding the mission,
Hmm.
but then you were also committed to doing it yourself
Hmm.
and not letting go and equipping the board and
Yes.
or whoever.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, in the middle of that, you're like, I'm so busy. How do I do all this?
Right. Right.
Which is I remember when we talked, it's a common thing for a leader to not want to delegate something, and even though they want to, and there's different reasons. So you were committed to doing it yourself, and worried that if someone else did it, oh man, maybe they
Yeah.
wouldn't be as successful if I would have. Or am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah, so more or less, there
Okay.
was there. So I think that in as a co-founder, I think that has something to do with it too, because it's
Hmm.
kind of my baby or my dream and mission.
Yes.
And so there was some of that ownership of I, yeah, I'm the only one who understands this organization, or I started it, and no one else might bring the same passion or drive
Mm-hmm.
to
Hmm.
this. So there was that, and and I had experienced that already, even adding staff.
Hmm.
Um, we are still a very small organization and don't have a lot of staff, but getting having to get an administrator even. So I when we started, I was the only one,
Hmm.
the only one working at this organization. So I was doing everything, administration, supervising, executive, like managing the daily tasks or so. And even delegating there, that was a whole change process myself that I
Hmm.
had gone through to let go of some things and learning to work together as a team and looking at who has the gifts to do these things. And I think and still we're as an organization in a place where trying to find the people who have the right gifts to be able to
Hmm.
release the fundraising and development too, which
Hmm.
we still haven't kind of sorted that part
Sure.
out or found the person
Okay.
to do that. But yeah, it's a process.
Yeah. So hopefully, as you describe that, we can hear it's not just I'm going to try harder to fundraise.
Right.
It's there's something else that's keeping the grip on not empowering others um, to do that. And,
Yeah.
and of course, I can recall in our cohort as well. There are plenty of other examples too. Another nonprofit leader who really saw huge demand for the service they were providing, but they were at a certain staffing level and a certain level of service, and really they should expand because there's such dramatic need. But their commitment was we got to serve and serve more. That was the change. But internally there was a commitment to we got to preserve this certain ethos. We don't
Mm,
want to lose who we are. Almost like an identity crisis for the organization that we would have to become more bureaucratic and bigger. And so we're committed to never doing that at the expense of serving more people. And so
right.
just I'm saying that as another example for our listeners and thinking about how sometimes our subconscious commitments can keep us from doing the thing we really want to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
In thinking about this conversation that you and I we're going to have today, I was reminded of a quotation that I encountered when I worked in a spiritual care department, and it was a quotation that the spiritual care department had displayed for passersby or
yeah.
so outside there. And the quotation is, and I think it summarizes so succinctly in a kind of an image of how challenging this change process is. And the quote is, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Ah.
That's a quote by Anais Nin. But the the quote has in it the concept of the pain and the
Mm-hmm.
risk
Mm-hmm.
that change requires. And that's part of the reason why change is so challenging and so difficult.
Yes.
So we are suffering or there's pain where we're at, and so we know we need to change as an
Mm-hmm.
individual or as an organization. We know we need to change. But and there's but we need to come to a point, a tipping point of some sort, where it's more painful to remain where we're at than
Yes.
it is to endure the pain and the risk of being willing to change or blossom.
That's wonderful. That's so well said. And I'm so glad you brought that up because that helps us think about the method of change. Okay, so you uncover, or actually, I'm concerned that I'm going to lose our ethos, or I'm concerned that I'm going to lose my dream. I'll have to let someone else
Mhm.
do it, and they won't be able to follow through my dream. So there's like fear there.
Yes.
In some ways, it's like an equation. You either reduce the fear of change or the
Hmm.
pain of change, or you stay long enough without changing for the pain to get significant enough. Now, what's interesting, and I'm curious your reflection with clients and or patients, people that you work with. Oftentimes, we're paying a price for not changing that we're not aware of.
Hmm.
It's like a hidden cost. It's like an opportunity cost. It's something we get used to,
Hmm.
and one of the methods is to kind of examine what's the cost of staying the same. It's like the cost of stagnation.
Yes.
And so we had a couple exercises to think about, well, actually not doing this, actually, you're in more pain than you realize, maybe, or there's more cost.
Hmm.
That's one way. And we talked about that as a group. And then the other way is to try to reduce the fear of change. Because fear is
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Fear is informative and it can prevent us from danger.
Yeah.
But oftentimes that fear of change is catastrophized
Yeah.
by assumptions we make about if we were to change. And so it's almost like a drip hose over time as we try to like chip away at that fear, not by like saying, I'm so brave, I'm going to just jump off the cliff now, but that understanding that perhaps it's not as scary as it looks. So I'm
Right.
kind of speaking in generalities, but that's our approach of
Right.
kind of getting unstuck from some things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was that like for you when you were thinking about trying to right size your fear and not of what would happen if you were to change some of that behavior?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the next steps are, or the homework kind of after our in-person gathering, once we had I uncovered that
Yeah.
or that belief or that immunity to change assumption that we were making, and that the assignment kind of was to find ways to test out that assumption.
Yes.
So, so my commitment was to go to the board at one of our board meetings and ask the board um, the question, right? If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, and I,
Yeah.
what would happen to the center? So, which was so I actually did that in a board meeting, and it was yeah the af so it was an interesting exercise because after they got over the shock of the question, right? And
Right.
they were expressing their sadness of like, oh, that would be really sad if you weren't here anymore.
Yeah.
But the response was not that, oh well, we'd have to fold up the center and that we'd be done, but more of a commitment of like, oh well, we'd have to find other ways to continue.
Hmm.
So I, yeah, that was information for me then to realize, well, I'm not carrying this center all by myself. It is a
Hmm.
board vision, and there is a commitment to, it's not just about me or me in this
Right.
role and position. The center would continue, and yes, it would be challenging, but there would be a will and a motivation to keep on going.
That's a great example because that's showing how it's like, oh, maybe there's some evidence here that
Hmm.
I'm not the one that has to carry this. It's my baby, and without me, it's not going to happen. And so, and I'm guessing it's not like you had that meeting and you were like, oh, now I can just delegate the whole fundraising thing, or I
Right,
can be free to run after the fundraising in ways I couldn't. It wasn't just like one test, right?
right.
That yeah. So
Well, and even now today, I still have um, that underlying assumption doesn't just go away. I think it's a daily or a I'm aware of it. So the awareness is really helpful because then I can actively recognize
mhm,
the tensions and the pulls of that
yes,
and make decisions that support me not carrying the weight of everything on my shoulders, but
sure.
trying to share more, right? Like so, but that's an ongoing thing. That didn't that that the awareness, having the awareness didn't just make that assumption go away. But
Hmm.
now I'm more equipped to recognize it and take steps.
Right. So the assumption that I'm the one that has to do this
Yeah.
was subconscious. It
Yes.
raised to the surface, and it's still
Yes.
there. And then it's kind of becoming. It takes work to not let that control your behavior
Right.
over time.
Right.
Yeah, I would. I'll say my own example as well as in my own immunity to change process, which by the way is a whole method of change developed, I'll say for our listeners by Dr. Lisa Leahy and Dr. Robert Keegan, two adult development psychologists who have a whole method and understanding and research behind how to help people change and organizations. So that's the reference that we're talking about. So for me, it's been I'm committed to trying new things professionally, but I'm also committed to never failing because failure
Mm.
would be just the worst thing. So one of my assumptions is that uh, success doesn't involve failure.
Mm.
So if I were to fail, that would show that I'm not successful. And of course, as you say it out loud, of course, success involves failure. But um, trying new things, I was hampered down by this fear that if it didn't work, I would never be able to, it wouldn't be successful. And so I'm just relating to you and saying, yes, for me too, I've done my own
Mm.
testing and I'm aware of that in myself, but I have to kind of convince myself. It still takes some work to say no. Not that I want to fail, but if I do, okay, that's a part of the process of learning.
Right.
So just trying to help with some examples as people start to imagine maybe what they are wanting to do, but might be kind of bound by this other concern or some assumption.
There's another or a very vivid example that I have from the therapy
Hmm.
world is working with women who want to leave a situation of interpartner violence or domestic
Oh, okay.
violence, and the research has shown how long it takes for someone to actually leave a situation like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, there we have a client or clients at the center who are in these situations.
Hmm.
And again, as therapists, it feels like having session after session, just hearing and hearing someone's desire and knowing maybe that it's not a safe situation or that they could leave or there's shelters
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
things that they could go to, and yet um, it's the client who has to make that decision ultimately, and it's their life that they are living, so
Hmm.
they're the one who has to somehow overcome. But that's where that the suffering that somebody is in a current situation,
Hmm.
people stay in it because it's the familiar. It's too risky
Yeah.
to shift to something that they don't know. 'Cause, and
Right.
it is and it is an unknown. So as we can't guarantee as therapists, oh, your life will be better once you
Yes.
leave. Because and um yeah, that's just such a vivid tension.
Yeah. In such a compelling, visceral
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
Sometimes I've heard it said, people will prefer the devil that I know versus the devil I
Yes,
don't know.
exactly. Yes.
Um, so speaking of this, so thinking of the cohort experience or just your professional experience with people, helping them through these change processes, like stepping out of an abusive relationship. Um, what have you learned about yourself as you try to help others? So I'm going to shift it from you're talking about changing your own behavior. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about you as a helper. So many of our listeners are helping others, whether it's a form of, hey, it's a discipleship process, and people are trying to um, exhibit different behaviors and different ways of being as pastors or things like that. So, what advice do you have, knowing what you know now from your own experience about competing commitments as these hidden barriers people see and experience about helping people change?
You can't do it by yourself. And that's
Huh?
why that's why I think that the the cohort experience of the adaptive leadership cohort was so valuable to gather 12 people together and to learn about other, what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in other people's situations, even though it's not the same as my own, but we're we can journey together.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, or like after, came back to London after being away for that adaptive leadership retreat
Yeah.
and then meeting virtually. But then I found there's a Pillar nonprofit network in London,
Okay.
Ontario, which is supporting all not-for-profit organizations where, and our center is a member of that. And I joined their ED CEO support network
Oh,
once a
okay.
month. So I'm actually, and so that also has been really supportive and
Oh, good.
helpful to meet with other EDs and CEOs. And then the interesting thing about that was I all along had been thinking that that it was my inadequacy as an executive director. Like I don't know how to be an executive director. I don't know how to
Mm.
do the fundraising. Like this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
I joined this support network of all other EDs and CEOs, and I found out that it's not me,
Mm-hmm.
that it's actually the environment. The
Oh,
times that we're living in are really, really challenging for registered charities right now.
yeah.
There's smaller pots of money and everybody's competing for the same amount of money and grants aren't coming in. And so that was so, yeah, it removed such a barrier and such a weight. So in trying to help and motivate other people to change, it's really, really helpful to be talking to other people. I don't know if you can get, I mean, s- perhaps some people can, right? Just be
Mm-hmm.
really within themselves. But I think it's really helpful to speak to other people, to find groups that can help you,
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, even when somebody comes for therapy, they're talking to somebody else about it and
Right.
receiving that support,
Right.
which is gonna, yeah, I think that you potentially will be more successful in achieving the change that you desire when you're not trying to go it alone.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes there's frustration or guilt or shame people have like, why can't I just do this
Yeah.
thing better? Why can't I
Yes.
commit to my own
Yes.
spiritual practices? I'm teaching about it. Or why
Yes.
can't I do fill in the blank? So having that perspective outside of your own self gives you some self-compassion, right? That's what I heard you
Yes.
saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and actually to bring the research in it, like you said, some people can just change.
Mm,
Like I decided to change, or maybe the white knuckle approach, the New Year's resolution approach.
yeah.
But the research say on people who are diagnosed with heart disease, and we talked about this in the cohort, is only 1 in 7 people who are diagnosed with heart disease and are told essentially you've got to change
Hmm.
to survive. Only 1 in 7 actually make those lifestyle changes. And that was actually the prompting that got the psychologists thinking of like what's going on here, and that resulted in this whole tool that we use
Mm,
called the immunity to change. And there's a whole book and everything. So that's a long way of saying for the 6 out of 7 of us, we
right.
need other people.
Yes. Yeah.
And we need some other perspective, some encouragement, some accountability. And it's not just just do it, but
Right.
maybe there's something else going on that we can be freed from or healed from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the most common piece of advice you give clients about this topic of trying to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve? Or I know because if you're a therapist, you're not telling people what to do. Maybe what do you wish
Mm,
you could say?
right.
Or,
Right.
or wish people
Well,
could just know and internalize about
yeah.
changing.
Yeah, just supporting, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but just supporting people in recognizing that it's hard work and that it's not easy and that it'll take a long time. And so that patience and persistence,
Hmm.
um, and being able to tolerate the distress of not knowing the right, like we had
Uh-huh.
talked about the risk of blossoming, right? The pain of of not, or being willing to stay in a situation that you know, even though that's not working for you. You
Hmm.
want to get to
Hmm.
somewhere else, but you're not. So how do we support ourselves in being okay with that,
Yeah.
in therapy terms called the distress tolerance, right?
Oh, okay.
How can we tolerate the distress of not knowing what the new thing is going to be like, what it's going to be like once we change,
Yeah.
um, and um, and being willing to risk that, right? And I really like the cost benefit analysis, right? Like,
Hmm.
what's the cost of staying the same? And you can also look at what's the benefit of staying the same, because there will
Hmm.
be, it's not all bad where you are, right? Like
Yeah.
you're, but then also what's the cost and what's the benefit of making the change
Hmm.
that you want to make?
Hmm.
Um, the radical acceptance is key too, of recognizing where you are right now and accepting kind of your current circumstance and situation. I
Hmm.
just again had a client who was coming to terms with, so the client had a genetic disability, but all their life kind of had denied the disability, right? Or like,
Hmm.
no, I'm the same as everybody else. And so really having to sit down like and look at it squarely in the face and go, no, I actually have a disability.
Yeah.
Um, and and so there's a radical acceptance there, which is counterintuitive, both probably for organizations and for
Hmm.
individuals, right? Because it's like, no, why do I want to accept this? And I've actually had clients say to me, well, you're telling me radical acceptance. Why would I want to accept this when I'm wanting to change it?
Hmm.
And, but the reality is that as, yeah, you're looking at kind of the point where you are in the here and now, and have to accept that reality.
Hmm.
And once you've accepted that reality, I think it has a lot to do with the self-compassion, right? You have compassion for yourself of where you are right now.
Hmm.
That actually is going to do more to move you toward changing, um, than denying, continue or to not have that awareness about either your
Yeah.
big assumption
Yeah.
or the thing that's holding you back from changing. So radical acceptance of that. And then a principle that I use all the time in therapy, I'm talking, change feels big, and it feels like, and clients, it's like, I want to get there right away, like
Yes.
tomorrow. And then we're always going in incremental steps. And so my favorite phrase is, what's the one thing?
Mm-hmm.
What's the one thing that I can do between now? And I guess that's where the cohort was so helpful. As we met monthly, um, there were kind of like, so what's the one thing that I'm going to do between now and
Yeah.
next month? That's the accountability, right? You're not making this big leap and changing everything, but what's the one thing that I can do today or now or whatever? It breaks it down. A seemingly impossible task breaks it down into a doable one thing perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What I love is you're adding something to the cost benefit equation of uh is there an achievable first step or just next
Yes.
step, something you can
Yeah, next
achieve
step.
that's
Yep.
small enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Building for success, right?
yes.
You
Yeah.
don't want the step to be too big that you're not going to be able to do it, because then you throw up your hands and go, oh, look there. Well, there's the failure too, right? Oh, I failed.
Right.
I can't do it. Might as well
Right.
just stay where I am.
Right. Right. Which just taking it back to our kind of change approach, there's a shorthand way. There's a whole method we use, but for the listeners, there's a shorthand approach of thinking about the one thing you want to do that you're not doing and asking the question, what would be the worst about if you actually did it? Like,
Mm,
what would be the worst about that of
right,
actually doing the thing you want to do? And then that's your clue to like the fear.
right.
And then of course the commitment to not experiencing that fear. So that's a kind of a shorthand way of trying to get to what is it that might be preventing you from doing the thing you want to do. And then what I love in the context of your kind of making an actionable step is it's not never being afraid again.
No.
it's embracing like, oh, maybe I am afraid of failure, or I am afraid that this thing won't happen. Can I move it from a volume 100 to 97?
Right. Yes,
And isn't
exactly.
that progress? And then from
Yes.
97 to 96.
Yeah.
Um, Excellent. Yeah. So the last question I'd like to ask guests is what gives you hope?
Hmm. Change and transformation can happen.
Mm,
I've seen it. I've witnessed it and I've experienced it in my own life. Um, so yeah, that gives me hope
mhm.
that we can change. Yeah.
That's great. I have nothing else to add to that. That's a great way to end the episode, is that it is possible. And so hopefully
Hmm.
there's some encouragement um, for the people who feel stuck. So thank you. It's
Hmm.
been a pleasure to talk to you and hear about your practice some more and about your experience. And I appreciate having you on.
Thank you. My pleasure.